interpretation of the stone has been done by Professor Rina Talgan from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and she's a professor in ancient art. And what she has done after several years of research is an interpretation about all the faces of the stone. What we can see in here, it's probably the representation of the temple. Why do we know that? Because of the elements that are represented. So in the front face, we can see a 7-branch menorah that it's on a rectangular base, and it is flanked by 2 amphoras and some other architectural elements. So this will be part of the entrance to the holies, not the Holy of Holies, just the holies. The menorah is a symbol that starts to gain importance after the Maccabean revolt, after the dedication of the temple again to God, and God himself he allowed the menorah to keep enlightened, and it represents that God is dwelling in the temple again, and it's among the Jewish people. So the menorah became a common element to represent Judaism in the 1st century. It was something common to find in Jerusalem, in Judea, also in Modi'in, where the Maccabean revolt started, but this is the first time that it is found in the Galilee. This is the most ancient menorah representation in the Galilee, and it's inside a synagogue in a Jewish community. The top face of the stone, it's very interesting. So in here we can see 2 elements that Professor Rina Talgan understood as the showbread. The showbread, it was placed in the holies, and there are 2 stacks of bread, of 6 different kinds of bread in 2 stacks. So this will represent in totality 12 kinds of breads that represent the 12 tribes of Israel among God. The bread of the temple, it was only consumed by the priest, no one else can consume it. So, according to Professor Rina Talgan, these 2 elements represent the showbread. A very interesting element is the 6-petal rosette that is surrounded by other 6 petals. But it also comes with 2 columns in the shape of a palmite. By the capital, we know that this is a palmite. So this has been understood as the 3 columns that allow the veil of the temple to separate the holy from the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God is present in the temple. So according to Flavius Josephus and some of the Mishnah traditions, the veil had some representations, probably geometric representation, and in this case, thanks to the Magdala Stone, it is believed that it was the 6-petal rosette. This rosette has been also found in some ossuaries from the Judeans of the 1st century. The lateral faces represent arches, and if you can see in the middle of the arches, it seems to start another column. So this can represent a 3-dimensional interpretation of the temple. So we know back in the Herod the Great period, he built a royal stoa, that's a big space and a big basilical space with many columns. So it is believed that represents the royal stoa by Herod, or also the Azara entrance, the Azara gates that they were in the temple. And according to some traditions, these gates were kind of dark, so it was needed some light. So that is why these 2 circular elements in the stone are believed to be oil lamps, because in the temple, since it was a big space, some oil lamps were needed to enlighten it. And in this face of the stone, it is represented 2 rosettes that actually are not rosettes, they are wheels of a chariot, and at the bottom there are 2 manifestations of what is believed to be fire. So by the book of Ezekiel and also by Flavius Josephus, we know that the chariot of fire, or the Merkaba, that it's represented as where the presence of God He is himself. It is sometimes represented as a chariot, and sometimes it is mentioned the fire. So in the book of Ezekiel, we know that the presence of God, it is quite close to this Merkaba. So since in Jewish art we cannot represent God himself, so it is represented something close to God, that this will be the chariot, or at least this space with fire and the wheels. According to Professor Adolfo Reutemann, this stone can also represent the interpretation of the temple along the history. So this facade with the menorah will represent the second temple, while the chariot of fire will represent the first temple. So what we know about this stone is that it has elements for the first century Judaism that represents the community itself. Are common representation, common symbols. Some of them that are represented that represents the temple, and this is the main interpretation of this stone, one of the most important discoveries in the last 50 years of the Israeli antiquities.